Hello everyone, and welcome to an opening video on the Basman Palatnik Gambit against the Sicilian Defense. It's a super aggressive opening, it's very trappy, and it's also completely sound according to the computer. There's not a single variation where white is worse. Let's get into it. Alright, so Sicilian Defense, so we play pawn to e4, and black plays pawn to c5 in Sicilian Defense. We will play knight to f3, and they play pawn to d6, the main line, and which is vastly played here. And instead of playing the main line here, which is pawn to d4, we will instead play the move pawn to c3, and this is known as the Delayed Alapin Variation. Now, the main idea of this pawn to c3 move is to play pawn to d4, and once they capture it, we can just capture back with our c-pawn, and then we can have two pawns in the center. And another little nice thing about it is that we open up this diagonal here, which will prove to be very useful in the future. So the vastly played move here is knight to f6, attacking this e-pawn, and instead of playing something like, pawn to d3 and having a very awkward position to defend it, we'll instead play the move bishop to e2. Now, this might look like a free pawn, and that might be what a lot of black players here think. Over 20,000 people have actually fallen into this. But if they end up taking this pawn, they are now completely lost here because we have the move queen to a4 check, making use of this diagonal here. And this is simply a fork of their king and their knight, so they have to block it. And now we simply take their knight in the center, and we are just much better here. So instead of taking the pawn, what they are much more likely to do is to simply develop their other knight with knight to c6. If they play this, and now we follow up with our main plan here, we play pawn to d4. Another little thing here, they still cannot take this pawn because, once again, pawn to d5 now, and we're attacking this knight, so it has to move, and yeah, simply now again, we get queen to a4 check, and this is simply a fork, and we're just going to win their knight in the center. I actually tricked it in 1900 of this, so if I can trick a 1900 of this, you're bound to get it in at least one of your games. So if they don't take it, what they're much more likely to do is to take our d-pawn, we'll take back, and now they take our e-pawn, and now we just push to d5. And at first glance, it looks like, well, isn't this completely losing for black? Don't they have to, move their knight, and then once again we get this. And that is true. If they do end up moving their knight, then once again we have this same idea here. However, the only move for them that doesn't lose, and that they're very likely to play, is the move queen to a5 check. This move prevents this queen to a4 check idea, so now that this knight can actually move, because obviously you can't play this, and if we try to play something like bishop to d2, then they can just take our d-pawn, at which point we will be worse. Instead here, we play the move knight to c3, known as the Basman Palatnik Gambit. Now, at first glance, this might seem completely insane. How could this be any good for white? However, I assure you, this is completely fine for us. White wins more games here than they lose, and according to the engine, white is actually slightly better here. Now, they will almost always take our knight, and we'll simply just take back. And another little trap here, they cannot take on c3, because then we simply play bishop to d2, and they have to back up their queen, and now we just take their knight. And after they take back, we have the move rook to b1. And this might not look super good for us because, doesn't black get even material for the bishop? 3 pawns for 1 bishop, that's even material. However, I assure you white is actually much better here because of these aggressive moves like, queen to a4 and, rook to b7 if they try to, move their bishop to defend this. Engine gives +3 in this position, which is, just massive here, especially for an even material position. So instead of taking this pawn, what they're much more likely to do is play knight to e5 or move their knight somewhere else. If they play knight to e5, which is their most common move, then we will simply castle here, and they will almost always take our knight, at which point we will simply take back for our bishop, and this is the point where they can decide to take this pawn or not. Now, if they decide not to take it, and instead play the best move here according to the engine, which is pawn to g6, then we simply play queen to d4, attack the rook in the corner, and they have to block it with pawn to f6, at which point we play rook to e1, and now they have to run to f7 with their king. And this is really the only way that the engine sees that black is not a lot worse here. However, this is the, according to the engine, the more equalizing move. This is plus 0.4 according to the engine in this position. However, I can guarantee you literally almost 0% of people will ever play this because it just looks just so inhuman. Nobody will ever play this except a computer. So if you get this, then simply play bishop to d2 and then end up pushing to c4. And we are still down a pawn here. However, we have a lot of compensation and corner the engine. This is actually better for us. So if they do end up taking our c-pawn, then we will play bishop to d2, developing our bishop and attacking their queen in one move. They will most likely back it up to c7, which is, according to the engine, the best move. And now we just keep getting very aggressive here. We put our rook on the c-file, attack their queen again, and they have to back up all the way to d8. This is just so sad for black. Like, look, every single one of their pieces is on the back rank, and it's move 13. How did this happen? So now we play the move rook to e1, simply putting our rook on this half-open e-file and targeting their king. And now, according to the engine, the only way they can get in a not completely losing position here is to play the move pawn to f6 and then once again king to f7 idea. However, what they're much more likely to do is to play bishop to d7, in which case we'll play bishop to f4. And these might not be the moves you always want to play in every single match. However, these are about the guideline moves, because if I did show you every single move, you would be here for hours. So they play the move here, queen to b6, because we are threatening to take this pawn here because they're pinned. So they play queen to b6, defending it, and now we play rook to b1. And this is the main ideas here. We're going to play rook to b1. We're going to target this b pawn here. We're going to play queen up to d2. We can get our other rook on the c file. We can maybe reroute this bishop back here to target the king this way. There's a lot of ideas here, and essentially the main plan here is just go on a full-on attack with your rooks, your bishops, every piece you have. And the last thing I want to show you is another example of how quickly this can turn into very bad territory for black, and how to attack in these positions. If they play the move queen takes on c3 here, queen takes on c3 here before trading this knight, then we will take their knight in the center. They will most likely take back their queen, and now we play bishop to b5 check. If they do give you this opportunity to check their king like this, you always want to take it. Their best move here, or technically the best move, is to slide the king to the side, but 0 people play that. What they're much more likely to play is bishop to d7, at which point we'll trade their bishop. They have to take their king, so they have a really awkward king in the center here. And now we play queen to a4 check. This is another one of the main ideas here to get on this diagonal here. They'll play king to d8, and now we play bishop to e3, very simple developing. And the thing here is that one of the main ideas we want to keep in these positions is to not be materialistic. We do not want to care about this d-pawn at all. Instead, we want to prioritize development. And even though black's move here is to take this d-pawn if they get too greedy, this can turn very bad for them. For example, this position is actually completely losing for them because we have the move bishop to b6. They cannot take it because then we take the rook, but even worse, they slide aside, and this is actually checkmate, so they have to take it, at which point queen takes on a8, their king has to run up. Now once again we have this main idea here of putting our rook on the c-file. We're already threatening mate, and this is just a terrible position for white. They're either going to get mated or lose material. Needless to say, this is completely losing for them. So this is the last thing before I go. I just want to give you a quick little guideline of all the main attacking ideas we have here. So the first ideas I'll look at are where we want to place our rooks, and there are 3 main squares that we want to place our rooks. We want to place it on the B file somewhere, the C file somewhere, and this E file somewhere. And these rooks can pretty much be interchanged on where is where. The second thing is where we will put our bishops. We want this bishop to either stay on f3 here, guarding this d-pawn, or alternatively, if they give us a chance, to eventually reroute and get on this diagonal, and in participation for our queen, we can have some pretty nasty stuff here. And what we want to do with this bishop on c1 here is to play bishop to d2 and push to c4, attacking this queen in the future. And a dream situation would be if we can get all our queen, our bishop, and our other bishop here, like this way, and we can just have complete diagonal domination here. There's definitely some checkmate in a position like that. And lastly, where we want our queen to go is to play queen to e4 check if we ever have the chance, along for our bishop if we can get it here. We can also play queen to d4, and but most commonly we're going to play queen to b6 to target this b pawn, and once again be able to come up with our bishop. Alright, so that is all I have for you today. Like, subscribe, do all that stuff, and I will see you next time.